touch my metal machine. It's also midnight and it's barking at the moon. I'm the metal machine. The rainbow in the dark is shining. Come touch my metal machine. It's also midnight and it's barking at the moon. I'm the metal machine. Burning the metal like the sky. Come blow my metal machine. It's also midnight and it's barking at the moon. I'm the metal machine. The rainbow in the dark is shining. Come touch my metal machine. We will never forward masters of the world. Come touch my metal machine. We will never forward masters of the Watch me light the sky.
Good evening, everybody. You're here for ArianeSpace, launching their Vega rocket to take PRIMSA, which is an Italian satellite, into orbit. We'll get to that. We got about 50 minutes until the launch. We have about, they said 15 minutes prior is when they would start coverage. I have the tab open in Chrome. We'll hear it when they go. So that's about 9:30-ish, somewhere around there, 9:30, 9:35. We should get live coverage from ArianeSpace. Happy launch night, indeed. So some cool stuff going on that probably needs mentioning before Monday night with respect to course correction. For those of you that don't know, maybe watching a VOD, course correction is the weekly space show here on Mixer now, apparently, that I'm also posting to coursecorrection.space, which is my website, and to YouTube. So if you miss a show, you can still watch a show. That's about 90 minutes long. We cover space news of the week. But some cool stuff with SpaceX. SpaceX is getting really close. What's up, Drakadai? SpaceX has pretty much locked in 2 April launches. One of them's a big one. They're both important, but one of them is going to be pretty awesome. So about a year ago, they launched Falcon Heavy for the first time. It was a demonstration. They launched Elon Musk's car into space. Remember the Spaceman videos, if you paid attention to it. They are taking up their first commercial cargo, which is an Arabsat, or Arabsat, however they want to pronounce that. But that is currently looking like it's going to be April 7th, which is a Sunday. Good. And it looks like it's going to be about 6 in the evening also. Very, very good. Which means we'll probably have a little bit longer of a launch party for that one. Falcon Heavy is a big deal. It's the most powerful current launch vehicle out there. As we talked about Monday, it is capable of lifting 57 tons. Nothing else gets close to that. Currently, SLS might get there. They ever, build it. But yeah, I segued into SLS and lunar stuff. Mike Pence was at a conference at Goddard today, Goddard Space Center, and he said something that I agree with. We're tired of making PowerPoint presentations of missions that go nowhere. And that's pretty accurate, especially considering the current space climate. The Gateway is not in trouble in any form, but aspects of it are in question, as we talked about Monday with the current budget proposal that's out there. The Block 1 extended service module, not the ESM, but the exploration service module, or exploration service stage, which is the 1B version or phase of SLS. It's the upper portion of SLS that would eventually allow us to go to places like Mars. It's on the chopping block, and the political climate around it seems to suggest that it actually may be on the chopping block. That right now they're focusing on getting SLS to run Orion to get it to Lunar Gateway, and it doesn't really seem like NASA is looking too much further past that right now. And there seems to be, like we talked about, a shift to putting the non-manned missions onto, say, for instance, Delta IV Heavy, Delta V Heavy, Falcon Heavy, and Vulcan Centaur Heavy. And, if Blue Origin ever launches a rocket, maybe on New Glenn. But, I'm not down on Blue Origin, but I don't think they belong in the same discussion with SpaceX and everybody else right now, just because what have you flown that's made you money and actually done anything? But, let's talk about tonight's mission. For those of you that are in chat, thank you very much for joining me tonight. we are going to bring up some information on Vega PRIMSA. This is the same website I always go to. I love this site for information on space launches. It's also what I have I've learned how to use its API. Dr. Death. And he didn't talk yet. That's why. Doc was just playing Satisfactory. We played it co-op Tuesday night. He has gotten significantly farther than me. He's got a lot of cool stuff. If you're not following Dr. Death, give him a follow.
These pandas are here to party.
He's got automated vehicles running around collecting his stuff now. It's really cool. Along with being, it's just he's doing well in Satisfactory. Let's put it that way. So Vega PRIMSA. Vega is ArianeSpace's smallest rocket. It's going to launch from Kourou in French Guiana. So it's the same area that we've watched a previous ArianeSpace launch from. They always launch from French Guiana. Again, the reason they're launching from there and say not France is because it's easier to launch closer to the equator and then launch in an eastward direction to gain velocity, and also being closer to the equator actually means you're moving faster relative to in space. So the closer you are to a pole, the slower you're moving. And the way you think about that is imagine that you stand at the North Pole a foot back and you draw a circle as it rotates. It's a pretty small circle, right? It's drawn very slowly. Now imagine that you stand 5 feet from the equator and you draw a circle as you move, as the Earth rotates. That moves really fast. That's the relative velocity, and that's why they launched from near Earth to the equator. And that's why ArianeSpace has built a lot of facilities in French Guiana. They're actually building the Ariane 6 pad there now, and it's been really cool to watch. But anyway, that's why French Guiana. But Vega has its own dedicated launch facility down there. It is the smallest rocket for ArianeSpace. And what's launching with PRIMSA is... Let me go down and get the PRIMSA, which I'm going to butcher my Italian here, is PRecursore Missione Applicativa. It's what it is. It's an Earth imaging satellite. It's going to be in a sun-synchronous orbit, and sun-synchronous is basically the same type of orbit that spy satellites like to be in, and that weather satellites like to be in. And what that means is that, one, the satellite is always in the sunlight, so that two, its solar panels always get power. But more importantly, the area of the Earth it's looking at is always lit. So it's a visual satellite, not an infrared. It may have infrared capabilities, but its primary mission is to take visual, video, pictures, like normal eye pictures, normal visual spectrum photography and videography. And what it's going to do is do observations of natural resources, environmental processes. It's a science satellite with dedication to environment and weather, effectively. So the launch window tonight is instantaneous, and for those of you not familiar with that terminology, instantaneous means that they can't get a hold. If they hold, it's over. They'll have to wait. There is no window. The window is exactly when they intend to launch. So there have been other missions we have watched that have had an instantaneous window. The Crew Dragon had an instantaneous window, and instantaneous is sort of it's not a misnomer, it's the optimal point of launch. There generally is a little bit of wiggle room most of the time around an instantaneous window, but that really comes down to the maker of the payload, if they're willing to accept any deviation from the flight plan at all with a launch vehicle. Most of the times that's no. They want an optimal nominal trajectory, and that means they must launch at the specific time, which is 1:50 UTC or 9:50 p.m. tonight Eastern time. So that's what's going on with them. We probably have like 30 minutes or so until we get flying here. So anything you guys want to talk about space-wise or space news-wise, we can dig into space news. I actually have this really, really cool thing set up now for space news. You can run through some of the headlines if you want. And that's not how I spell Feedly, but it still worked. So this one's going to be on course correction on Monday night, but this one's pretty important. Boeing Starliner, which is the other piece of Commercial Crew, is going to slip. It was supposed to run this summer for its demonstration mission, it now looks like Boeing is behind. And that's good news and bad news. It's good news for SpaceX. SpaceX is the other competitor in the Commercial Crew Program for NASA. And that means that Crew Dragon, which is almost guaranteed to be certified at this point for human flight after the abort test, which is later this spring, it pretty much means they're the only company that's going to be doing business with NASA astronauts. And it's important because of a few things. One, NASA had to buy extra Soyuz seats this year simply because of a situation like this, where Boeing's going to slip on Starliner, and let's suggest that SpaceX can't make Crew Dragon 2 capsules as quickly as NASA requires. I doubt that's true. But if it is, then NASA is left in a position where they're still reliant on Roscosmos. But also, there are no Soyuz seats in 2020. Roscosmos has basically told NASA, no, other requirements mean that we can't fly your astronauts. And I find that funny, because how are they intending to get their cosmonauts to the International Space Station unless they're also going to become reliant on commercial crew? But in any event, they're saying that and I'm going to scroll down to the piece down here that's important. A post by Reuters has estimated that pushing back uncrewed Starliner test, which was supposed to happen this summer, could mean astronauts will not fly on it until November of this year. If it doesn't fly until November of this year with people on board, then Starliner is not going to get certified for crewed flight this year. It would probably be early next year. And like I said, that leaves us in a position where there is no way that NASA can rely on commercial crew for 2020 forecasting of manned mission flights. They may be able to make those adjustments into the year, but as they look at ways to get astronauts to the International Space Station, all the marbles are now with SpaceX. So what else are we going to talk about? No, that one's, you already know about Vega PRIMSA. That one we know about. I want to see all of my news, thank you very much, not just the ones that are... Why are you being like that? Here we go. This is all my news. If I click a button that says red, it takes it off there. I have a view that's not that. Let's see what else is running out there. Space news. So this one is interesting. Boeing reaches long-awaited SLS engine milestone as NASA makes EM1 2020 schedule push. So again, as we talked about on Monday with SLS and Orion and the slippage and maybe using commercial rockets to fire Orion up for the EM1 mission, the political climate at NASA has shifted since I wrote up all that stuff. So now that they're not saying they can do it with SLS, and I still don't think they will. I still think the only thing that's going to happen is that SLS will slip, which means Orion EM1 will slip. But they're talking like they can catch up. It's NASA, and it's one of those things where it's like, I'll believe it when I see it. If NASA can exceed a deadline it sets for itself that isn't related to Apollo, then that would be magic, because they haven't really met anything deadline-wise since Apollo. That's the only deadline set for NASA, I believe, that they ever met, was put man on the moon by the end of the decade. So, obviously, we'll continue to keep up with what's going on with SLS. It's hugely important. But the news around it, I would say if you're reading space news on the internet, you have to research what you're reading right now with SLS and deadlines and what it means for commercial launches of Orion, because there's some really good space websites out there. There's no doubts. The NASA Space Launch Now, those are pretty reputable places. They both have paywalls for the content, but then you get into other websites or news sites that are not completely dedicated to space, and the titles become kind of clickbaity. Like, just be careful what you read. I will do my best every Monday when there's information that's relevant for SLS to present it to you. I'm not saying I'm the source of truth on the matter, but it is important that you view SLS information through an informed lens right now, and not simply accept everything that everyone hears about it to be true. So this article that I have referred up to is NASA Spaceflight. It's actually one website I pay for because their news is ridiculously accurate. Moving past that, let's see. Yeah, we know about that. know about the Cannonball Pulsar. Let's see. Blue Origin studying repurpose of New Glenn upper stages. That will, again, show me something when you have something. Blue Origin. Competition's good, but again, Blue Origin does not, in my opinion, belong in the same conversation with launch providers who are actually launching rockets. Provide a demonstration mission, and then provide a commercial launch, and then we'll talk about it. SpaceX is way ahead of them, and it feels like a lot of people want to just say, oh, Blue Origin's right there. And it's like they have a money backer that's right there. But remember how old SpaceX is. It's, 2004 is when it was founded, so it took them 15 years to essentially become the dominant U.S. launch provider. Blue Origin's not that old, and they haven't really launched anything yet. Let's see. That's, you get into astronomy one day if you guys want, but I don't think that's what you want to hear about. Here we go. Let's look at Beresheet. That's 1 day old. We've seen this photo before. Beresheet, for those of you that aren't aware, very first launch we ever watched was New Santara Satu. It was a ride share with on Falcon 9 to put Beresheet also went up along with an Air Force satellite. Beresheet is still on course, still looking good. And like I said, I feel like that's our kid. I feel like Beresheet continues to be our baby. When it lands on the moon, I think the Outlaws community will raise a glass to that one. It's the first meaningful mission that we actually watched. For those of you unfamiliar with Beresheet, I know I look at the chat to see who's here, so I know how to talk through things, and I see like 2 people that might not know. Beresheet is a Space IL. It's commercially funded, the first commercially funded lunar lander ever. It's automated, and it's due to land soon. Like in the next few weeks, it should do a lunar inject burn and then start to decrease its apoapsis, and then start talking about landing. And when they land, they're going to bounce. They're going to do some movement around with their lander to fulfill Google Lunar X Prize. Even though it's not open anymore, they are still trying to fulfill that requirement just to show that it can be done by a commercial company. Let's see what else is in here. This one is interesting. We talked about OSIRIS-REx on Monday. This photo right here was taken by OSIRIS-REx. I know Dustin loves all of the land on things that are moving really fast in space stuff. That is particles coming off of its surface. Why? Because Osiris didn't shoot anything at it. Now, Hayabusa 2 is getting ready to fire something at Ryugu, but OSIRIS-REx hasn't fired anything at Bennu. So, like, what's that? Becomes the question. It's what they're calling a particle plume. Well, it's an asteroid, right? I mean, it's a carbonaceous asteroid. What in what is effectively a rock could cause that? Because the trajectory of the particles coming off of it doesn't suggest anything else hit it. It just suggests that the asteroid itself essentially took a dump in space. And we saw photos up close last Monday that showed how gravelly the surface of this thing is. Also, it is now becoming the new definition for what black is. Apparently the surface of it is so black, it's blacker than a vinyl record, which is pretty black. But if they can explain what the particles coming off of, dark. The carbon on the asteroid is dark. What that means, we won't know for a couple years, because remember, OSIRIS-REx is intending to bring back sample. I think it was 60 grams or 60 kilograms. I'm not sure which one it was. I think it was 60 kilograms. But that's why I write things down. But we won't know what's making up exactly something that dark until they recover it. There has been, for those of you not familiar with NASA history, or space history, it's not a NASA mission, but there have been other asteroid space body material recovery missions. Rosetta's one, but the idea will be that I don't know how they're doing it with OSIRIS-REx, but in the past, what they've done is they have actually had the craft come back to Earth orbit and effectively eject a reentry canister that contains the material, and then that canister comes down and they recover that. I believe Roscosmos did that in the past with lunar material, because they actually didn't set foot there themselves. But how OSIRIS-REx does it really doesn't matter. It's interesting to think about. But I am interested into what exactly this thing is made of now, because this one caught me off guard this week, and I said, when I saw this photo, my reaction is still what it is today. What is causing that? It comes back down. I mean, this is physics, relative physics, but physics. The thing's traveling at a very fast speed. All of the things that are sort of stuck to it, the gravel, is traveling at that speed as well. So something, according to Newton's laws of physics, must create the force. Some force must create that mass motion that makes these particles come out. And it very much looks internal. We don't know, but it doesn't. It looks like the asteroid itself ejected material. Is that a part of its rotation? It's spinning so fast that eventually some of the material that's on it simply can't spin as fast as the core mass of the asteroid and just spins off. Maybe. That's probably likely, because Bennu itself is narrower at its equatorial point of rotation than it is at its ends, which is the same reason the Earth is pear-shaped to a degree, or fat on top and fatter on the bottom, narrower in the middle, is because that rotation actually causes what is called a frictional force that compresses that mass in the middle a little bit. We'll see, but it's interesting. And again, I'd really like to know what caused that. It looks dormant. It's an asteroid. I mean, I don't think we've ever discovered an asteroid that has any sort of active liquid core underneath a mantle that would cause a sort of volcanic eruption, even if it was just a material eruption. So again, I don't know what causes it, but it's interesting. Let's see what else is on there. That one's dumb. Here we go. Another one from, that's Beresheet again. They are on course for the moon. It performed a 1-minute burn at 8:30 Eastern. This was 8:30 Eastern 2 days ago, and spacecraft is functioning as expected. This is what I tend to read it like every day as I start to put together the show. By the way, I feed everything into one place so it's easier to organize. So this is interesting. This is an op-ed that I read, and it's before commercial LEO market, which is low Earth orbit market, can flourish, the ISS must be retired. The ISS is old. It launched in 98, so it's about to be 21 years old. It has what looks to be a lease on life through 2026, but the topic effectively is saying that while the ISS is up there, all of the big time LEO stuff is going to be dedicated to putting astronauts or putting material on the ISS, and that there needs to be a paradigm shift in thinking. I think that getting rid of, I would say this, having an orbiting science laboratory that is relatively quick to access from Earth is good. The ISS is old. It has exceeded what I believe was to be its initial anticipated lifespan, but given the lack of crewed launch capability from NASA, a decline in Roscosmos' ability to do launches, and ESA doesn't have a dedicated space launch vehicle. They are completely reliant on commercial providers like ArianeSpace. It seems to be that building another international space station on top of Gateway is, where's the money coming from? So I get what the writer of this article is saying, but I think there's no current plan to build another low Earth orbiting space laboratory. So until there is, I don't know how you advocate completely saying goodbye to ISS. But that day will come where ISS is simply going to age out. The technology on board still functions fine, and they had a water leak earlier this year because of an accident, not because of mechanical failure. But until there's a replacement, how do you simply say, let's get rid of ISS outright so that commercial companies can flourish? Because the example is this: SpaceX is flourishing and doing their own thing anyway, and their vision isn't low Earth orbit, their vision is Mars and beyond. But companies in the commercial space can flourish while they are still dedicating a portion of their mission portfolio to sending people and things to ISS. So, what else is interesting in space news this week? InSight. I haven't talked about InSight at all on course correction. InSight's this guy. So there's a probe that comes off of this thing. This is on Mars right now, and it's designed to drill. It's a heat flow probe that's supposed to drill down, and it didn't get very far. It's 30 centimeters below the surface of where it currently stands. Is the probe is stuck. Now, the word stuck and the word jammed are two different things. It can't get any further past where it's at, meaning it drilled down and it hit something and it can't drill into it. So that means it's probably pretty hard rock. So what happened is the rock actually diverted. So instead of going straight down, it diverted the probe as it drilled down off center. And they continued to try to go, and then it hit another rock. So you'll notice and look at InSight. InSight doesn't have wheels. So it's not like this thing can move to a different spot easily. Whether or not they decide to maybe bounce it with whatever propellant is left in it is up to NASA and JPL. But this is why I advocate some sort of electroproton engine on board probes like this, because those solar cells could power a low impulse engine to move it around without the need for wheels. The clock's ticking on InSight to get this done. It's well past the mission parameter for doing this specific aspect of its mission, but they're not going to move on until they figure it out. It's been stuck for a couple weeks now. Let's see. Saturn and Equinox is actually just a cool picture. This was a really interesting rendition of the rings of Saturn at equinox with the sun getting very little light. So this is a very low reflective demonstration of what Saturn looks like at equinox, where some of its rings just aren't getting enough light to be reflective. Speaking of equinox, if you have clear skies, last night through this morning was the really good time to look at it, but there is the moon is very big and very interesting in its facing right now due to current season, our positioning with respect to the sun and how well lit it is. The next time you have an opportunity to see the moon in this level of detail to naked eye is like 2142 or 2122, but not in your lifetime. So if you have the chance to go outside tonight and look at the moon, if you have clear skies, do that. It'll be one of those views that is really cool. Or if you don't see it tonight, in the morning is also a good time to see it. This one, that one we'll talk about Monday. That's way too detailed to cover for SLS. Let's see. Oh yeah, this one. So this is Hopper. I'm going to talk more about Hopper and Starship in depth on Monday as well, but just to give you guys a heads up, it's coming. SpaceX. At the end of the day, SpaceX does not want to use Falcon 9 as its primary vehicle, nor does it want to use Falcon Heavy. It wants to use this thing, which is called, one part of it right now is called Hopper. It will be in its final form called Starship, which used to be called BFR. Actually, BFR is the whole thing put together still. But this is the craft that SpaceX is planning to take to Mars. It's also the craft that SpaceX is planning to use for everything. But what's going on this week down in Boca Chica is SpaceX has put the first Raptor engine. Again, I'll cover what Raptor engines are with respect to Merlin 10 on Monday. But the test they're doing this week is to effectively they've mated one Raptor to the Hopper, and they're just basically trying to hop it on the ground and make sure that all the engineering works. And then eventually they're going to put 3 Raptors on Hopper and make sure that they're going to set it up about 500 feet. There's actually been some interesting residential warnings this week to residents to basically stay home in Boca Chica, which is a small place. I think that's why SpaceX chose Boca Chica. There's not a lot of people to inconvenience, but highways are closed down there. Methane detectors are making sure like the air is not being polluted with excess methane from Hopper's tests. I know that I didn't watch live because SpaceX isn't obviously broadcasting this. There are people that are sitting like 6 miles out with cameras zoomed all the way in, and it's super blurry. And I watched a little bit of it. I was like, this isn't useful. When someone can bring me a high definition video of what they're doing, and quite honestly, with SpaceX permission, then I'll watch it. But Hopper test fires are supposed to be this week. we'll see what they say at the end of the week with respect to it, and I'm going to update what I already have made for Starship, because we will talk about it as one of the primary things on Monday with course correction. So we're about probably 5 minutes, actually, yeah, 5 minutes away from Ariane getting ready to go with their launch coverage. I'm going to let them show off what they have built and what the Italian Space Agency, who's behind PRIMSA, has built. So we won't go too much into exactly all of it. We covered the basics of it. So because the launch will be in about 20, I'm going to take a quick break, get a drink, go to the bathroom to make sure I don't have to get up during it. I would encourage you guys to do the same, and I will be right back.
The bar is open.
Hey, I can be JV.
Indeed, T-minus 20 minutes and counting. So, one of the other things I had, and this is what I was going to save for right before they started coverage, was this thingy. This. Timeline of launch tonight, as I kind of get more comfortable in my seat. So, obviously, T-minus 0, liftoff. This is a previous photo of Vega, obviously. At about 30 seconds into the launch tonight, they will be going Mach 1. At 1 minute 54, the Vega first stage will separate. At 3 minutes and 38 seconds, the second stage will separate. And the third stage will start about 13 seconds later. And then 5 seconds after that, the fairing comes off of the payload. And then 3 minutes later-ish, 2.5, 3 minutes later, the third stage separates. And then you have the AVUM, which is the Attitude and Vernier Module, or the fourth stage. Now, this is a tiny, tiny rocket, and it has 4 stages. That really speaks to Vega's versatility for a small launch platform, or vehicle. And then you're talking about 12 minutes into the flight when that first AVUM cutoff takes place. Now, if you look here, 51 minutes later is when AVUM ignites a second time. And then it burns for about 1 minute and 10 seconds. And then at 54 minutes, which would put us very close to 11 p.m., actually more like 10:40, is when PRISMA itself will come off of the AVUM. And that's putting it into its correct position. So you can see the second AVUM burn is a circularization burn to put it into the specific orbit it's supposed to be in. The first AVUM burn is to finalize its apoapsis. But that's the timeline. I don't know if we'll stay with it or what ArianeSpace will cover past that third stage separation at 6 minutes. So we'll see how much of it they cover and basically how much of it's worth covering tonight versus how much of it is worth catching up on Monday night. But that is what will be going on this evening. So we will get the brief from ArianeSpace and probably the Italian Space Agency. We'll watch the launch all the way through, at least that third stage SEP. Probably, if they show it in any degree, we'll watch the fairing SEP. the AVUM ignition. But that burn is going to essentially put it where it's supposed to go in terms of its altitude relative to Earth. And then that fourth big step, that AVUM second ignition to circularize, we'll see. We'll see if we stick with it that long. But it should be about 2 minutes away from them kicking off things. Or 1 minute away, now that it's 9:34. So again, guys, thanks for hanging out. I know that pregame can vary greatly depending on what we're covering for a launch. SpaceX seems to be what brings all the people to the yard, and that's cool. SpaceX is awesome, but it's important to do SpaceX launches and NASA launches in parallel with the rest of the world. The Western world does not pay enough attention to things coming out of ArianeSpace and the European Space Agency. How many of you guys knew JAXA had Hayabusa 2 up there, on Ryugu? I mean, I'm trying to make sure that we cover as many launches as we can, simply because it's interesting to watch how everyone does it and what all the different launch vehicles look like. So let's bring up ArianeSpace. Here we go. So they're at 83 seconds on their countdown and counting. We're going to stay with them. Let's make sure their volume's all the way up. And we're about ready to go here. So if you haven't gotten a drink yet, you got 75 seconds to do so. Also, my schedule opened up Saturday night, so I may be playing something. I haven't made a decision as to what to do yet with respect to Saturday night. So Sekiro's coming out tomorrow. Depending on what I see in Dustin's stream tomorrow, I may be picking it up or I may be waiting. I don't know. But here we go. Vega PRIMSA. This launch was supposed to happen last week, by the way, and it slipped. We were actually in a position last week where we would have had 3 launches in 3 days, and this one slipped and slipped and slipped right out. Yeah, oh man, the pressure. I mean, I won't take skill into account, Dustin. We'll discount bad skill. That's not the game's fault. Saturday night, you mean satisfactory. You're not addicted at all, Doc. We'll see. Satisfactory is fun to play, for sure. I enjoyed playing it. I'm not sure about streaming it. It didn't seem to grab people in the stream. I had a conversation yesterday. It was like, the more streaming I do that gets viewer buy-in, like they feel like a piece of it, is when people really engage here. But here we go. 3, 2, 1. That's my... See, there's the mission patch. I couldn't find it.
Buonasera, benvenuti a tutti in guida francese. Hello and welcome.
There we are. I was like, did I pick the
Space
French
Center.
stream? No.
Soyez les bienvenus à
They're doing it in both. Awesome.
de l'Europe. Nous allons,
They're supposed to have an English stream and a French stream. So 1401 is a little bit later than what they originally said. So let me see if I can change that a little bit. A minute and 10 seconds later. 15:10.
PRISMA, un satellite de l'agence spatiale italienne. Vous allez découvrir tout cela tout au long de cette émission, mais on retrouve tout de suite la commentatrice anglophone, Katie Aswell, qui est au plus près des équipes.
About 6 seconds off.
It's over to you.
Thank you very much.
There we go.
Thierry.
English.
And indeed, a big welcome to everybody joining us tonight for our live broadcast here at the Guyana Space Center, the 3rd launch this year. And as Thierry said,
yay,
we are flying
English.
the Italian colors.
Those models in the background are really
we're
cool.
launching an Italian satellite called PRISMA. Right now, it's inside the launcher waiting for liftoff. That's scheduled
Thank
in
you.
Roughly 13
I love the
minutes time.
I understand how
Now,
difficult it is to be a
Executive
presenter.
Vice
I'm not saying
President
streaming is
of
the same as
Missions,
presenting this, but
Purchasing
the launch
and
vehicles in the fairing
ArianeSpace is Luz
with
Fabregat. It may be a
13
long
minutes to go.
title,
No
but,
shit.
She knows all about tonight's mission, and thanks indeed for joining us on the floor, Luz. So it is an all-Italian mission tonight.
Not true.
Yes,
the
right.
engine
It's a very
on it is
Italian,
built in the
launch
Ukraine.
Tonight, we launch Italian satellite built by Italian industry under the leadership of our customer of tonight, OHB Italia. and Leonardo. And this satellite is for the Italian Space Agency. And the launcher also is very Italian because it was
it's a very Italian
leadership
vehicle.
of the
Not
ADIO,
just Italian, very Italian.
And so today I would like to say benvenuti a tutti.
And Luz, so we are 12 minutes now until launch. What's been happening so far in the countdown?
We started the countdown about 9 hours ago at the beginning of the afternoon here in French Guiana. Since then, we have removed the mobile gantry. We have done all the operations to prepare the launcher for the launch, for the liftoff. And so now it has become more and more autonomous, more and more ready for the launch.
So after liftoff,
while we're talking through this, I kind of went through timeline before. So one of the cool things I forgot to mention with ArianeSpace is, you remember the last time we were here, we watched OneWeb do its demo. Let's have marinara instead of fuel. So Ariane 6 is the new big thing that Ariane's going to put up, right? Remember when we talked about OneWeb? We talked about how they could potentially launch like 23 satellites at a time. They've now confirmed OneWeb and Ariane on Ariane 6's very first launch will carry 30 OneWeb satellites, which I thought was worth mentioning.
With the upper stage, a first boost of the IVOOM, a little less than 5 minutes. It will be up to, I would say, Canada. And then we will be at an altitude, a very, very huge speed, an altitude of 200 kilometers, which is not so high. And then we will have a long ballistic phase of around 40 minutes, going up to the North Pole, and then on the other side of the Earth, going down up to Indonesia, and then at that point,
I would say a CubeSat is probably, if this is its core stage, imagine this maybe scaled by a factor of 10 at best. The core of that sat's not much bigger.
Will be reignited for a little more than 1 minute before the separation of the satellite.
Wonderful. Well, I wish you all the very best. Luz Febreguet, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. So we're going to find out now. We'll be looking to see what's been happening in the launch campaign.
Welcome everybody, benvenuti a tutti.
I've been a freaking evil job for 30 freaking years.
11th of January. This
Ronin
with a ground support equipment
catches the blueberry buster.
Preparation payload facility S1. After its arrival in this building, OHB Italia team successfully completed all the mechanical, pneumatic, and electrical checkouts. Then the final preparations were performed before the spacecraft transfer to the S5 fueling facility on the 8th of February. Propellant filling operation.
Doing well. We're getting ready to watch ArianeSpace in about 9 minutes put Vega up with the PRIMSA satellite, which is an Earth imaging satellite. We've been doing a lot of space content lately and running a weekly web show on Space News. And right now, the members of the ISA are telling you what's going on.
Giant containing about 88 tons of solid propellant. The launcher stage, directly on the launch table, is transported vertically on a truck.
See how tiny that is? I mean, in your brain, calculate how small Vega is compared to how huge, say, Falcon Heavy or Saturn V was. Falcon Heavy is or Saturn V was. The scary thing is, and I'll show you some size comparisons on Monday because I have this already built, but I'm going to show you how big Starship is compared to Saturn V.
The stages are then
80 tons of marinara
area and integrated on the previous stage to complete the launcher. The fourth stage of the Vega launcher, with the AVOOM engine, has a liquid propulsion with storable propellant.
Does anyone know why they put those big water towers next to every single launch facility apart from the need to maybe put out fires?
12 campaign days.
What else is the water at the launch site used for?
Launcher acceptance tests were completed. This test verified the functioning of the
it is to keep something under control, but not heat.
Of the flight mission, the synthesis test, which took place on February the 22nd.
This actually kind of pairs into Dustin's question about density earlier in the week in the BOSA channel. It's actually designed to keep sound contained.
The PRISMA satellite was then
that much water in a water tower can actually dampen the reverberation coming off the rocket.
The day after.
they can also spray water, and you'll see water be sprayed at rockets during launch. Again, not to keep it cool, but to dampen sound vibrations.
On the flight. The Vega launch readiness review held on D-1 authorized the beginning of the final.
When we get to ArianeSpace later on, like in the future, we'll do an overview of their launch facility, and it's really cool what they're doing with water dampening systems.
Which is in the Mission Control Center, and that's what we're looking at.
That rocket that's modeled up front, not to scale, is a 2-booster configuration of Ariane 5.
We can see the flight directorate, ArianeSpace top management. Luce Fabregat, who we just chatted with, is heading up this team today. Top management from ArianeSpace and Avio. And Ettore Scardecchia ran the Kourou Marathon on Sunday, and he came second. So huge congratulations to him.
This isn't intended to sound, defamatory, but if a white man can win a marathon,
Vega
that's saying something.
Since it entered
if you watch the Boston Marathon, even the Pittsburgh Marathon, it's usually like a Kenyan or an Ethiopian for good reason that is winning those races. It's like, get me off the camera.
3 launch vehicles here at the Guyana Space Center.
You'd be in the back playing Battlestar Galactica, so we need to play again soon. Some KSP. Height 30 meters, mass 138 tons, performance 953 kilograms.
Take a look at the top.
I wonder what they mean by performance. But thrust at liftoff, 2,200 kilonewtons.
Our satellite.
It's not a lot for a rocket, but it's enough to do what they're doing.
That's what PRISMA looks like. And as we
so you can see on the upper left, that slant, that's the main imager. There's no doubt in my mind that's what that is.
Built by an Italian, the Italian prime contractors OHB Italia and Leonardo Space and Airborne
Discovery
Systems,
Houston, press to ATO.
Italian Space Agency ASI, and it's all traveling on board a rocket
about 5:30 to go.
Designed and built by
about
the
2
Italian
seconds behind their clock.
contractor Avio,
3
who
seconds
leads
behind
a
their clock.
consortium
Close
of
enough.
European industries all working together. That's what I call team.
This is actually a place I'd love like to visit. It's French Guiana, South America, but I would love to go down there and take a look, because my only visual interaction, like in person, is museums and going down to Kennedy when I was a kid. By the way, I need to go to Kennedy again.
The real thing. And inside that building we saw, this is the Mission Control Center and the operational teams focusing hard now at this point before the launch.
So I wonder.
Now, as Luce said, the final countdown started just over 9 hours ago.
Next weekend.
During that time, there were various major moments. The onboard computer was activated at L. If we say L is
happy birthday in advance.
Launch L.
Hey Google, remind me next Saturday that it's Dr. Death's birthday.
The mobile gantry withdrew 3 hours and 15 minutes before launch, and the entire system was ready at minus 50.
I'll remind you on March 30th at 8 a.m.
To the next important milestone.
À tous de DDO, attention pour la séquence finale lanceur.
Well, then I'll get reminded the next time I stream, but I'll remember it's the 28th. I got a bunch of birthdays in March. About 4 minutes to launch.
Top I0 moins 4 minutes.
And the Range Operations Manager has announced the beginning of the synchronized
So range operations is actually something that's worth talking about for a minute. When we attempted to watch the Delta IV Heavy launch last Friday, range operations is actually at the end of the day what was the big problem with the range and the range radar system at Kennedy Space Center is what was the long delay there. And the range operator at the end of the day must give clearance to whomever wants to launch anything.
To these panels,
it can be as ready to go as it can, but if the range operator sees that the airspace is not clear, he'll kill it.
Status panels. They are showing us the status of 3 main systems: the rocket and pad, the range, and the satellite. The range is the name we give to the space.
Truly a juggalo of unrivaled illness.
Funny Val, what's up? 3 minutes to launch. She makes it.
It also includes the tracking stations, which are downrange of the spaceport. Now, we have a couple of control centers. Obviously, we've been looking at mission control, which is in charge of the whole mission. This is the launch control center. These teams are in charge of everything to do with the launcher and the pad. And then we have a number of different teams working in here, but primarily one of them is responsible for the operation.
That guy has an unfortunate first portion of an Italian name. It's Pizzi.
Authorization to
I'm doing well. I've been enjoying the refocus of the stream on science and launches, and the response of some of the regulars has been really good. So I'm very happy to be here tonight to watch yet another rocket launch with you guys.
For the flight readiness of the vehicle.
That said, with 2 minutes and 15 seconds to go, I have about a third of Monday's show done. I'm going to build more into it this weekend. But, as I said during the show, if you want a question or topic to be discussed on course correction, go to the BOSA channel of the Discord and put it in there. And I will do my best to provide you as objective an answer as I can, and as grounded and scientifically and mathematically correct answer as I can.
So they're very close to the pad.
If you don't know where the Discord is,
now, watching over all this final phase of the synchronized sequence, we're 1 minute now and 37 seconds to launch.
What would you give to walk out on that balcony down there, even for this smaller rocket launch, and just watch?
The Mission Control Center are now coming outside onto the terraces outside to go and watch the launch with their own eyes rather than watching it on
and going down to Wallops
here.
Wouldn't be that hard. For me, it's an 8-hour drive from here to go to Wallace Range in Virginia. Not the right one. Yeah, I understand. That's your favorite. I might to ride on a rocket, even if it meant my death, just to see what it's like.
Time to say our very best wishes to everybody who's worked so hard for today. To the PRISMA teams, the industrial consortium.
Yeah, writing another story.
Italia and Leonardo.
To be a great way to
Italian
go.
Space Agency, the operational teams are waiting to fly their satellite once it's separated, to CNES, ESA, ArianeSpace, and of course to all of you.
That's
who
what the
are
right
watching
one's
us on the
researched for. 30 seconds
Good luck,
to go.
everybody, for the launch.
So, a question came up the other day. Rocket guidance, even on a manned flight, is almost entirely fly-by-wire now. Falcon takes over with a minute to go, meaning launch control basically has a button to abort and that's it. Everything else is controlled by the launch vehicle. I would assume they are at that point with Vega now. 10 seconds.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage P80.
There she goes. She's tiny. It doesn't sound tiny indeed, but in terms of lift vehicles, it's a smaller rocket. You can tell by how quick it jumped off the pad. You can count the French. Je ne parle pas le français bien. I used to be able to speak it, but that was 20 years ago.
Acquisition de la télémesure par la station de Saint-Jean.
So that came across the top real quick is acquisition of signal from the downrange tracking station. That was actually 2 people flying on those jetpacks that are actually rocket powered, Dustin. I did see it and looked into it, and it was not a meteorite.
And they are off. PRISMA.
There's another angle they're not showing that actually shows the wingsuits clearly and shows 2 different rocket trails. There were 2 people.
In the skies over the Guyana Space Center, the Vega launcher takes its name from the brightest star in the galaxy of in the constellation of Lyra.
So let's see if they've got onboard cameras tonight. I doubt it.
Tonight she is lighting up our night sky.
That's pretty to watch go, though. So, again, for those of you not familiar with orbital mechanics, with respect to the physics and vectoring of it, rocket will take off, and then it will roll to line up its compass heading, and then it will pitch. And that pitch is called a gravity turn. They're turning with the curvature of the Earth, using that speed they already had relative to their position to the equator. And they're actually trying to outpace their fall going over the Earth's curved surface.
This is what we're looking at.
And yes, flat earthers, it's freaking round.
He's telling us that the propulsion of the engine is
not. The CGI, here we go.
That follow button.
And there's the beginning of the dogleg maneuver.
It's altitude 71 kilometers. Distance from the launch facility is 136 kilometers, and it's going, I would assume that's 2,750 kilometers a second.
When it takes off, it has to go on a certain trajectory because it comes off
It's square. You're right. The Borg took over, shaved off the corners.
And then depending
by
on
Australia.
which direction it's going in, it turns and flies in that direction, and that's what the dogleg is. We have turned and we're flying towards the north, and he's telling us that everything is going north.
100 kilometers in space. Remember we talked about the Kármán line on Monday? 90 kilometers, 100 kilometers, that seems to be the wiggle room where most people define space. It's in space now. How do we get to the bottom? You pull the plug and go down the drain.
Actual position of the launcher.
4,000 kilometers a second.
End of the dogleg maneuver.
Now 125 kilometers altitude, 300 kilometers downrange.
And you could see just at the bottom of the screen there.
Coming up on stage separation.
Our altitude 134 kilometers above our planet. On the bottom left of the screen. In the middle, our distance. That's the distance from the pad if you were to draw a straight line from the pad across the Earth to the position where the launcher is over.
Séparation Z23.
There's
on the right, the speed, and now confirmation of the separation of the Z23 stage. Burnt its fuel, we don't need it anymore. There's a few seconds.
And here comes the 5 seconds later, there goes the fairing.
Z9 is now switched on, and the
an interesting word for fairing.
Fairing.
Who knows what quaff is in French?
Jettisoned. The propulsion, he says, is
Carnival.
Nominal. So we don't need the fairing anymore. It was protecting our satellite from the rigors of the launch. It was protecting us from friction. It was protecting us from the acoustic vibrations at liftoff.
Hairdo, exactly. The hairdo of the rocket's gone.
Just how loud that is, or was.
An interesting word for fairing.
And so we are officially in space.
You've been officially in space for a while. So there's a replay of the launch.
We lifted off from the pad 4 minutes and
it's
40
bald now.
seconds ago.
So remember, there's going to be 6 minutes into the flight is when that
from
final
the pad, you can see
fourth stage engine should light.
Space Center on the northeastern coast of South America. Galileo is the tracking station at the Guiana Space Center.
But better looking, indeed, Doc. It's cool that they're showing their tracking stations on the ground. The Bermuda tracking station will pick them up next, as they're technically traveling northeast relative to the poles of Earth.
Fin de mission sauvegarde.
Shot into the sky, and it was a beautiful launch. We managed to see it all the way until the separation of the first stage. So that we were very, very
why did you not show video of the separation of the first stage then? Because we would have loved to have seen that at home, ArianeSpace.
Crossed the threshold into space a little while ago. That was 100 kilometers above our Earth.
You could light a little flame when you launch.
The Kármán line. The border with space.
She referenced the Kármán line, and those of you who watched Monday know what that is. Oh my God, it's crashing!
The atmosphere is so thin that it can no longer support vehicles with wings. So if we want to stay up once we're above the Kármán line, we have to use rocket science.
That's a good explanation of exactly what it is. That's the definition between air flight and space flight. Not enough air to support
We're looking on the right-hand side of the screen at computer-generated images. The experts put a series of data.
They need Red Bull for the wings.
This is a simulation of those predictions. So a simulation of exactly what's been planned for the flight. It's
so
great.
there's another tracking station I saw on that map real quickly called Saint Hubert or Saint Hubert. It looks like it's in Newfoundland.
Z for Zefiro, a kind of wind.
And now they're on their final engine.
Italian wind, a little bit like the Sirocco or the Mistral.
That should light, I think it was 6 seconds later.
So, third stage has switched off its engine.
Bermuda station acquisition.
The main propulsion phase of the flight is now over. And we are picking up the signal at the tracking station in Bermuda.
So here comes that AVUM burn, that first one.
An island in the Caribbean, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think
the
tracking station's actually on Cooper's Island, which is just to the east of Bermuda. In fact, the teams at the Bermuda
So remember, once this burn happens,
space
this is the first main burn to begin its final apoapsis, to achieve that final apoapsis, and then there will not be another burn until almost 40 minutes from now, and I really doubt we stick with watching them. I don't even know if they'll cover it to that point.
In the 1960s.
What you see in the background, CNES, C-N-E-S, that is the French Space Administration.
As Luz described earlier, heading up over the Caribbean, along the east coast of
Considering Ariane is a French commercial company. There you
east
go.
coast of Canada.
Yeah, so to give you, she just gave a pretty good reference.
Galileo tracking
It's
station
coming up on Canada in terms of distance.
The Galileo tracking station, that's the
Pretty
one
cool.
that was at the Guyana Space Center.
There's your burn.
And we've switched on the engine of the
Is it cap?
first
Well,
stage, or
hat then.
AVUM,
It lost
as
its
pronounced
hat.
in French,
I
and
always
maybe in Italian
thought it was
as well.
hair too.
So we've really
Thank
started
you for looking
the
that up,
next
though.
phase of our journey.
Still, thing that goes on the head.
Everything's going according to plan, he says. So AVUM has taken the wheel, and its job is to deliver our satellite.
We'll probably
to
make
its
sure.
required
Yeah,
drop-off in space.
That's the English definition. Yeah, I mean, that's fair.
Climb us up to
They may have a very
625 kilometers above the Earth
less
to do
literal
that.
meaning in French.
You can see on the top right-hand side of our
Translating
screen
languages is always interesting.
how we started off climbing quite steeply, and
Gimme
we're
hat.
plateauing out now. Our altitude at the moment 253 kilometers, so we've still got another
Gimme hat.
few hundred kilometers to go.
Can't burn the 18 plus out of the stream, can we? I don't care.
Today is Vega's
Like I said, we T for Teen stream
14th mission
launches
for
and
Earth
science
observation.
content simply because I want to make it more accessible
Sorry, it's 14th mission in total,
for those
and 11
kids
of
in
those
school.
have been
What you want?
Earth observation
Speaking of
satellites.
Canada, are you in Canada
You
or
see our
Japan
flight
now?
path there, heading, although we've gone into the range of the Bermuda tracking station, we haven't actually got to Bermuda yet.
Shinja is
so
on a
Earth
long vacation
observation
from work, and
involves
he's going to
using
Japan.
satellites and space to gather information about the physical,
Remember what I told you about
chemical,
Okinawa? Be careful.
and biological systems of our
But glad
planet.
you're
And PRISMA
there.
is going
You're
to do
watching
a
this
very
from the plane on your way to
important job.
Okinawa.
So let's
Sweet.
find out more now about our satellite.
This is cool. Let's talk about PRISMA. That was well done by them. Coming up on that burn, that first AVUM burn will end in about what I would estimate to be about 2 minutes. PRISMA mission is an Earth observation system fully funded by the ISA. Combines a hyperspectral sensor with medium resolution panchromatic camera. The combination allows the satellite to determine the chemical physical composition of the objects present in... can't read that fast. I was reading pretty fast. ...223 images per day. Yo, Vega! I was trying. Orientation is about 98 degrees. Orbital altitude 615 kilometers. That's pretty high up there. So watch that altitude. Yeah, these slides need to be slowed the F down for sure. OHB Italia and Leonardo joint venture to make PRISMA. But yeah, I can't read it as fast as it's coming up and going down. It's almost like it's designed to be watched twice. Includes the world's most powerful hyperspectral imager in addition to the panchromatic camera. That one was up there long enough. It has many applications in the field of environmental monitoring, resource management, crop classification, pollution control, and national security. The launch did take place aboard the ESA's launcher designed and conceived in Italy. Man, that is going way too quick. They have a patch for this? Yes. They did. They did not publicize it, and I could not find a media kit, but if they do show their mission control board, it's a circular, it's a roundel that has rainbows going across it. There it is right there.
And during that film, we picked up... He's telling us we've got 1 minute left of propulsion on the upper stage. And we picked up the signal at the tracking station in Canada during that film. It's in Saint-Hubert or Saint-Hubert in Quebec, just outside Montreal.
Oh, so Quebec, not Newfoundland.
And the aerospace industry.
That's you, Italian and French?
Too. The Canadian Space Agency has its head office in the borough.
I'm Slav strong and Scottish, generally.
Now we're tracking using telemetry. These
hard to
tracking
classify.
stations have big dishes, which
Hard to
pick up a signal
classify your
from the
heritage
launcher as it
if you're
flies
Slavic
over,
because
and
countries
that
change so
information
frequently.
gets sent here to the to the CVI, the teams here
Trajectoire nominale.
at the Guyana Space Center.
How you doing tonight, Omega? Thank you for the host, by the way.
Telling us how the flight's progressing in real time.
12 minutes past launch.
Those are the three
The
tracking stations.
vehicle that is still there, which is the AVUM and the payload itself, is essentially crossing over
now. So we're entering
paralleling
the first ballistic
Canada
stage.
at this point. It launched from French Guiana. I'm doing well. I won't do one of those kits because there's no privacy guarantee on your DNA.
Mean? Well, I believe that it means that we are traveling without propulsion. And that's what
So
we're
the
doing
AVUM
right
is cut off. They're coasting now. They're going to coast
fast enough to cruise
for about
without
40
the
minutes.
engine. And this ballistic phase is going to last for 38 minutes, roughly.
Almost.
We're also doing various maneuvers here. The upper stage is a very clever piece of kit.
Yeah, after they've entered it into a computer, that was my concern.
AVUM, because that stands for attitude.
There has been 2 cases
and
of
vernier
those
upper
ancestry
module.
kits being used in court
It's the
cases.
smart part of the launcher. It's the command and guidance module. It's a little bit like the cockpit
So
in the
we're in the coast, and like I said, there's not much that's going to go on until they do a final burn.
Its job is to deliver our satellite to a
So
very
we are
specific
likely going
orbit.
to wind down from there.
And it's designed to inject.
So we'll
different
turn her
payloads
down.
into different orbits because each
Give you some idea of what's coming up for us. We will do course correction on Monday. I can tell you that topics that are already on the board are continued discussion of SLS. I have one thing I have to fix from the last one. I have what I'm calling a correction burn because I screwed up on something or didn't elaborate effectively enough, and I want to clarify.
can switch its engine on and off.
And then we are definitely going to get into SpaceX with Starship and Hopper. I want to talk about the upcoming Falcon Heavy launch that now it's becoming more firm. I have other topics I can add to it. I actually plan to. We're talking about Mars 2020 and the helicopter. But again, I am open to your suggestions, and I really want the community to feel like they have ownership of that program. So if I am going to, I am going to continue it, but I really want there to be a longer piece. Like Dustin's question on Space Force was great, but I really want to have a longer section where we're talking about things you may be curious about. It doesn't have to be launch or craft related. I got into a policy conversation on a question last week. I'm willing to talk about astronomy. If you guys are curious about something like in the astrophysics realm, I will do my best to research that topic. When do tourism space flights start? I think the very first two companies that are going to offer commercial space flight are obviously Virgin Galactic. They're pretty close. Their crew capacity, I think, is 3 plus 2 pilots right now. That could be wrong. I think it's an odd number. It's either 3 or 5 in the back. And then SpaceX, believe it or not, SpaceX is going to very likely monetize part of their business off of commercial tourism launches. But the problem with that is the cost to launch a Falcon 9. Falcon 9 launch with a successful recovered stage is about $45 million. 7 seats on board. So you're talking 6-point-some million per seat. You fill it to break even. So we'll see who has 6.7 million in their pocket to fly on that. Now, if they do some sort of rideshare where they are able to launch a payload from an attached service module, that could lower that cost. But there is nothing publicized from SpaceX with regard to that sort of a mission. It's a pricey ticket. I think that SpaceX wants to do it, but they have to figure out a way to lower costs. Virgin Galactic is entirely focused on tourism. They are not building... They have an independent launcher that they are building for payloads, but their primary focus has been to build a space plane that can be dropped from a dropship, which we demonstrated 2 Fridays ago. And that's less expensive, because the entire craft gets recovered. And it's pretty readily flyable again. Like, they could turn... in a ideal world for Virgin Galactic, they could probably turn out 2 or 3 flights a day. to put people up, and that would lower their cost. But in any event, like I said, it's 30 minutes or so, and there's just one more burn, and it will simply be a final orbital circularization burn. So we're not going to stick with it for that long because it's also 10 o'clock at night. We'll give confirmation and course correction on Monday that this payload reached where it was supposed to go. I have all confidence that it will. The AVUM is reliable. But we will go ahead and back out there. So for those of you who watch these all the time, we have some people that are here every time. I really appreciate it. For those of you who came in curious as to what we're doing, this Vega launch was relatively small. It has relatively little hoopla around it, and it's a very, very routine launch. But, all right, Dustin, have a good night. But coming up, the next big launch on the schedule that I can forecast right now is April 7th. If SpaceX and Kennedy hold to it, it will be Falcon Heavy, and it will be in the evening around 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. That's a big one. As other launches get confirmed in the intervening time frame, we will add them to the schedule. But if I don't talk to you before then, let's all regroup back here Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time for Course Correction Episode 3. Cool stuff in that slide deck. I tried to tease it a little bit without going into too much detail, and we'll see you guys then. Let's see who's out there to host real quick before we move on. Yeah, Skin, just fly safe, man. Enjoy your trip. Just me. So let's actually see who is out there that I can host, because not everyone has the Outlaw tag. Let's have a look. Who am I following that we can host? Halo Master Chief, Satisfactory. Have people I think have gotten enough saturation on that. No one else really streaming. Division, I don't want to host. I haven't hosted Mangry in a long, long time. He's playing Halo Master Chief Collection. Mangry's a good guy. We'll go out there, drop a host on him, and you guys hang out, follow him if you like him, and we'll see you back here on Monday night, if not sooner. Have a great weekend. If I don't talk to you before then, I'll see you probably in Dustin's stream tomorrow morning. You too, man. I need to figure out a time to come down there when there's no matches that we can talk about this summer, just to make sure we're online. Number 98 is my Iron Maiden traveling companion. We're on international break right now? Is that what's going on this weekend? I just saw Scotland get the crap kicked out of them by Afghanistan. Yeah, so this weekend might work. Hey, Saturday. What day? Saturday or Sunday work better for you? All right, then I'll be down one of those 2 days this weekend, and we'll catch up and get talking on Iron Maiden. Otherwise, we'll take you. Doors at 8:30. Sweet. That's me going down to have breakfast and beers with number 98. Well, he'll pour it for me. All right, guys, have a good weekend. Talk to you later. We'll get you over to Mangry.